Hello. Welcome to our storytelling channel, Grey Revenge. Before we begin today's story, I kindly ask you to please subscribe to the channel. It's really important for our growth. I'm sure you're going to love being here every day, listening to new stories. I stared at the phone in my trembling hands. My son David's voice still echoed in my ears like a physical blow. "Dad, you won't be welcome at Christmas dinner this year." The words hung in the December air of my modest living room, mixing with the scent of the coffee I'd been enjoying before my world tilted sideways. At 65, I had dedicated the last 6 years of my life to financially supporting David and his wife Amanda. After my beloved wife Sarah died from cancer, leaving me hollow and purposeless, I found meaning in helping my son build what seemed like a stable, successful life. But apparently, stability didn't include gratitude, and success didn't require acknowledging the man who made it possible. "Amanda's parents are coming from Boston," David continued, his voice getting smaller with each word, like he was shrinking inside himself. "They're very refined people, Dad. Harvard graduates, they own their own investment firm. You understand?" His voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence that would complete the insult. I understood perfectly. My technical degree in construction management and my calloused hands from decades working as a contractor, building homes for families who actually welcomed me inside, weren't suitable for the Thompson family's pristine dinner table. My working-class background was an embarrassment to be hidden, not a foundation to be honored. Through the kitchen archway, I could see the new dishwasher I'd bought David last month when Amanda complained their old one wasn't quiet enough for entertaining. $2,000 of my Social Security money, probably used 3 times since installation. Where will I spend Christmas then? The question came out quieter than I intended, carrying the weight of a man who had nowhere else to go, no other family to turn to, no traditions left except the ones I'd been building with my son's family for the past 6 years. David's face crumbled like wet paper. "Maybe you could visit Aunt Rose, or we could do something the weekend after." The weekend after. Like Christmas was just another appointment that could be rescheduled for convenience, moved around like a dental cleaning or oil change. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the manila folder I'd been avoiding for months. Bank statements spread across the wooden surface like evidence at a crime scene, each page documenting another month of my systematic financial bleeding. The automatic transfers jumped from the paper like accusations, a paper trail of my own stupidity and boundless love. The numbers were staggering when laid out in chronological order. Month after month, year after year, the same electronic withdrawal. $3,200 on the 15th, vanishing from my modest retirement account into David and Amanda's joint checking. I pulled out my calculator, the same one Sarah had used to balance our household budget for 30 years, and started adding with trembling fingers. First year, $38,400. I remembered that year clearly. David had lost his job at the marketing firm, and Amanda was pregnant with the baby they eventually lost. "Just temporary, Dad, just until I get back on my feet." The second year, another $38,400. By then, David had found work, but Amanda decided she needed to stay home to focus on her mental health after the miscarriage. Third year, $38,400 more. Amanda's mental health apparently required expensive therapy, yoga retreats, and a complete wardrobe makeover to rebuild her confidence. Fourth year, the same amount, this time for the house down payment. "It's an investment in our future, Dad. Property values are rising." Fifth year, another $38,400 for furniture that Amanda insisted was essential for our lifestyle. Sixth year, the final $38,400 plus the kitchen renovation, the new car down payment, and countless emergencies. Total $334,400, more than a third of $1 million. Enough for me to have bought a beach house in Florida. traveled Europe like Sarah and I had always planned, or simply lived with dignity in retirement instead of eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to make ends meet. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the numbers until they blurred. Sarah's life insurance money, my retirement savings, the emergency fund we'd built for our golden years together, all of it gone. Poured into a house where I wasn't welcome for Christmas dinner, financing a lifestyle that came with the condition that I remain invisible when it mattered. The next morning arrived crisp and clear, December sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows as I nursed my second cup of coffee. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how much money would disappear from my account in 2 weeks. The freedom tasted better than the premium Colombian blend I'd finally allowed myself to buy with money that would normally go towards someone else's mortgage. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for First National Bank. The automated system offered me options in English and Spanish. How accommodating to working-class people like me. I pressed the numbers deliberately, each beep a small act of rebellion against 6 years of financial servitude. Customer service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today? Her voice was professional, efficient, carrying no judgment about why a 65-year-old man might be cancelling payments to what was probably his son's mortgage on a Tuesday morning in December. I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd forgotten I knew. Certainly, sir. I'll need your account number and some verification information. I rattled off the numbers, listening to her type in the background, the clicking keys like a countdown to my liberation. I see the transfer you're referring to, Mr. Mitchell. $3,200 monthly to Wells Fargo, account ending in 8847. How long have you been making this transfer? Jennifer asked, probably reading the history on her screen. 6 years, I answered. The words tasted bitter, like medicine I should have taken years ago. And you want to cancel it effective immediately? There was something in her voice, surprise, maybe respect for an old man finally standing up for himself. I looked around my kitchen at the outdated appliances I couldn't afford to replace, at the walls that needed painting, at the windows that leaked cold air because every home improvement dollar had vanished into someone else's American dream. Effective immediately, I confirmed, and meant every syllable. Done. The transfer has been cancelled. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Jennifer's voice carried a note of finality that sounded like church bells to my ears. No, I said, surprising myself with how good the word felt. That's everything. 3 days later, my phone rang at exactly 10:30 a.m. while I was reading the newspaper comics section, a luxury I'd forgotten I enjoyed when I wasn't stressed about finances. Amanda's name flashed on the screen like a warning label on a bottle of poison. Robert. Her voice carried that familiar tone of barely concealed impatience, the same voice she used when explaining why the grocery store brand wasn't acceptable for her dinner parties. I need you to pick up my parents from the airport this afternoon. Their flight from Boston arrives at 2:00 p.m., gate B12. The audacity was breathtaking, like being asked to cater your own funeral. Less than a week after being told I wasn't worthy of sharing Christmas dinner with her family, I was being summoned to serve as their personal chauffeur. The hierarchy was crystal clear. I was good enough to provide services, just not good enough to be seen as an equal. Amanda, I said calmly, setting down my coffee mug carefully, did you forget about our conversation on Sunday? The conversation where she and David made it clear that my presence would embarrass them in front of her educated, refined parents. Look, regardless of that discussion, we need to focus on practical matters now, she said, her voice sharpening with irritation. My parents need transportation, and you're the only one available during the day. Besides, let's be honest here, Robert, you don't have much else to do anyway. There it was, the final insult wrapped in a command. In Amanda's world, I existed solely to solve her problems and fund her lifestyle. My time had no value, my dignity was irrelevant, and my hurt feelings were inconvenient obstacles to her convenience. "What airline?" I asked quietly, my voice betraying nothing of the plan already forming in my mind. "American Airlines, Flight 1247. They'll be at baggage claim Carousel 4, Amanda replied, relief evident in her voice that I was cooperating. "And Robert, make sure you wear something decent. Maybe that blue shirt you wore to David's graduation. They notice things like that." Even in accepting my service, she felt compelled to critique my appearance, to remind me that I needed improvement to be worthy of breathing the same air as the Thompson family. "Of course," I said, surprising myself with how easily the lie came. "I'll take care of everything." "Good, and don't be late. They hate waiting." The line went dead without a thank you, without acknowledgement that she was asking a favor from someone she'd just insulted, without any recognition that courtesy might be appropriate when requesting services from the man who'd been funding her lifestyle. I set down my phone and looked at the wall clock above my sink. 10:35 a.m. Plenty of time to do exactly what I'd promised. Take care of everything. At 2:15 p.m., I was settling into my favorite armchair with a fresh cup of Earl Grey tea and the crossword puzzle I'd abandoned that morning. The December sun slanted through my living room windows, warming the space where I'd spent so many lonely evenings calculating the cost of my generosity. Today, the silence felt different, earned, intentional, like the quiet after a storm has passed. My phone buzzed against the wooden coffee table. Amanda's name appeared on the screen again, probably wondering where her personal driver had gone. I let it ring, counting each buzz like a small victory. The satisfaction was deeper than I'd expected, like finally scratching an itch I'd carried for years. 2:47 p.m. brought another call. This time I could see the preview of her text message. "Dad, where are you? My parents are waiting and..." I turned the phone face down and returned to my crossword. 7 across. Long overdue justice. The answer would come to me eventually. By 3:30, my phone had buzzed 6 more times. I'd finished the crossword puzzle. The answer was comeuppance. Brewed a second pot of tea and started organizing my desk drawer. Amazing what you could accomplish when you weren't rushing around serving people who considered you their personal servant. The 7th call came at 3:45, this time from an unknown number. Probably William or Margaret Thompson, Amanda's parents, borrowing someone's phone at the airport customer service desk. I imagined them standing there with their matching leather luggage, checking their Rolex watches, wondering how their daughter's hired help had the audacity to strand them. I let that call ring too, each unanswered buzz a small act of rebellion against 6 years of being taken for granted. Outside my window, a neighbor was raking the last of the autumn leaves, his children running around the yard with the manic energy that only December afternoons could bring. Normal families doing normal things, no one stranded anywhere, waiting for someone who would never come. By 4:15 p.m., my phone had become a constant buzzing presence, like an angry wasp trapped against glass. Amanda's number alternated with the unknown number, then David's number joined the chorus. The symphony of their panic was the most beautiful music I'd heard in years. I walked to my kitchen, unplugged my landline from the wall, and turned my cell phone completely off. Perfect silence descended on my house like snow, pure and clean and long overdue. For the first time in 6 years, an entire evening stretched ahead of me without the possibility of emergency calls for money or last-minute demands for favors. The article appeared in the Spokane Chronicle 3 days later, buried on page 4 of the local section, but prominent enough to catch the attention of anyone who knew my name. The headline read, Local retiree abandons elderly couple at airport during winter storm warning. I stared at my own photograph, an old picture from my construction company's website, probably 5 years out of date, positioned above 3 paragraphs of carefully crafted character assassination. The byline belonged to Patricia Williams, someone I'd never heard of, but who had clearly heard plenty about me from William Thompson. The article painted a picture of cruel abandonment. William and Margaret Thompson, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were left stranded at Spokane International Airport for over 4 hours when family member Robert Mitchell failed to appear for a pre-arranged pickup. The couple, both in their late 50s, waited in frigid temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. Winter storm warning, it had been 48 degrees and partly cloudy. But truth was apparently negotiable when William Thompson was telling the story. "We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that," William was quoted as saying. "We called repeatedly, but Mr. Mitchell never answered his phone. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment isn't just inconsiderate, it's potentially dangerous." The article continued with carefully worded implications about my mental state and pattern of concerning behavior, painting me as an unstable old man who'd suddenly snapped without provocation. No mention of the Christmas dinner exclusion. No context about 6 years of financial support. No explanation of why a family member would suddenly refuse to provide free chauffeur service. Just Robert Mitchell, the villain who abandoned helpless tourists during a blizzard that existed only in William Thompson's imagination. I read the article 3 times, my anger crystallizing into something cold and strategic. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about reputation, about the business relationships I'd built over 40 years, about my standing in a community where I'd lived my entire adult life. William Thompson had declared total war using the most powerful weapon available to a man of his social class, the press. One well-placed article could destroy decades of hard work, turn friends into strangers, make my name synonymous with cruelty and instability. It was a smart move, I had to admit. Ruthless, calculated, and effective. William understood that in a city like Spokane, reputation was everything, and he'd just dropped a nuclear bomb on mine. But I wasn't the broken, compliant man I'd been 6 months ago. That man would have called David, apologized, resumed the payments, and tried to smooth things over. This version of me was done apologizing for other people's behavior. I spent the next 4 days living in a different world. Not the world where I was a broken-down old man who let his family walk over him, but the world where I was Robert Mitchell, businessman, strategic thinker, someone who'd built a successful construction company from nothing and wasn't about to let entitled parasites destroy what I'd worked 40 years to build. My laptop became command central, browser tabs multiplying like reconnaissance photos in a war room. Social media profiles filled my screen. William Thompson, investment advisor, member of the Boston Athletic Club, board member of 3 charitable organizations. A man who'd spent his career in positions of trust and influence. A man with a reputation worth protecting. Margaret Thompson's Instagram painted the perfect picture of refined living, charity luncheons, wine tastings, vacation photos from Martha's Vineyard tagged with blessed and grateful. Every post carefully curated to project success and sophistication. Each image a small monument to a lifestyle built on the assumption that money appeared magically, without sweat or sacrifice. Amanda's Facebook timeline told the real story, though she was too narcissistic to realize it. Posts about our beautiful home, featuring photos of the kitchen I had financed, check-ins at expensive restaurants during months when I'd covered their mortgage payments. A status update from last week. So excited for Christmas dinner with family, can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skills. Our home. Our success. The narcissism was breathtaking in its completeness, but it was David's LinkedIn profile that provided the final piece I needed. His recent activity showed a new connection. Patricia Williams, lifestyle editor at the Spokane Chronicle. The same Patricia Williams who'd written the hatchet job about me connected to David just 3 days before the article appeared. I leaned back in my desk chair, looking at the evidence spread across my screen, like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. These people had made 3 critical mistakes. First, they'd underestimated me completely, assuming I'd accept their attack and slink away quietly. Second, they'd gone public with their assault, which meant I could go public with my response. Third, they'd documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect catalogue of hypocrisy and entitlement. I clicked through to Patricia Williams' profile. Journalism degree from Washington State, 15 years at local newspapers, no previous connection to investment banking, which meant William had reached out cold, probably through someone in Boston's financial network. A 10-minute search through business directories confirmed my suspicion. 4 mutual connections between William Thompson's investment firm and Patricia's editor-in-chief. The article hadn't just appeared organically. It had been planted with surgical precision by someone who understood exactly how small city journalism worked. Amateur hour, I thought, opening a new document and beginning to type. Christmas Eve morning dawned grey and cold, the kind of Spokane winter day that made you grateful for warm houses and family gatherings, assuming you were welcome at either. I had other plans. Plans that had been crystallizing for days, like ice forming on a lake, beautiful and inevitable and potentially dangerous. I laid out my evidence like a prosecutor preparing for the trial of my life. Bank statements organized by year, each monthly payment highlighted in yellow marker. Receipts arranged chronologically, showing the pattern of my support for their lifestyle. Photos printed from their social media accounts, Amanda's new jewelry, their vacation pictures, the expensive Christmas decorations currently adorning the house I'd helped them keep. Everything copied 15 times, 1 packet for each dinner guest, according to Amanda's Facebook event page. The newspaper article went on top of each stack, my red pen notes visible in the margins. Lie, written next to William's quotes about dangerous weather. False, beside claims about my erratic behavior. Missing context, highlighted where they'd failed to mention 6 years of financial support. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral, pressed and ready for another kind of farewell. Today I was saying goodbye to the man who'd been a doormat for his family. Tonight I'd be someone who commanded respect. At 6:30 p.m., I loaded my briefcase with the evidence packets and drove toward Kendall Yards, where David and Amanda's house glowed with warm light against the December darkness. Cars filled their driveway and lined the street. Friends, neighbors, Amanda's book club, people whose opinion mattered to a couple desperate to maintain their social standing. Through the front windows, I could see figures moving around the dining room. Amanda playing hostess in the home my money had helped them buy. David carving the turkey my mortgage payments had purchased. The perfect Christmas tableau, missing only the man who'd made it all possible. I parked across the street and checked my watch. 6:45 p.m. Perfect timing. Late enough that everyone would be seated for the main course, early enough that they'd still be trapped at the table with nowhere to escape. No graceful exit available for anyone. The front door was unlocked, exactly as I'd expected. Amanda loved showing off how safe their neighborhood was, how they didn't need to worry about security like people in rougher areas. I let myself in quietly, the warm air hitting my face, along with the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting from the dining room. "But darling, that's simply not how we handle investments in our family," someone was saying. Probably William, dispensing financial wisdom to people who didn't realize their host's success was built on an old man's social security checks. I walked into the dining room carrying my briefcase, watching 15 faces turn toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to horror. Amanda froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips, the red liquid trembling like blood. David's face went pale as winter moonlight. William and Margaret Thompson looked like they'd seen a ghost, which in a way they had. "Good evening, everyone," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the sudden silence like a blade through silk. I set my briefcase on their marble sideboard, the one I'd helped pay for when Amanda decided their old furniture wasn't sophisticated enough for entertaining. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." Amanda found her voice first, though it came out strangled and higher than usual. "Robert, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave immediately." Her face had gone red, clashing with her carefully chosen green dress. "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase with deliberate precision, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and this lifestyle you've been showing off." I pulled out the first stack of documents, the papers rustling like dry leaves in the sudden quiet. A woman I didn't recognize, probably one of Margaret's charity friends, leaned forward with undisguised curiosity. "What is he talking about, Amanda?" "He's having some kind of episode," Amanda said quickly, desperation creeping into her voice. "David, call security or something." But I was already moving around the table with the methodical precision of a man who'd planned this moment for weeks. I placed a packet of documents in front of each guest, my voice conversational and calm. "Here are the bank records," I said, as casually as if I were passing around vacation photos. 6 years of financial support, $330,400 in total. Mortgage payments, down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything you see around you. The room went silent except for the rustling of papers as 15 people began examining the evidence. I watched their faces change as they absorbed the numbers, the dates, the undeniable proof of my generosity and their deception. Eyebrows rose, mouths fell open, wine glasses were set down with trembling hands. One man started, then stopped, staring at a bank statement that showed $3,200 transferred on the 15th of every month for 72 consecutive months. "Outrageous!" finished the woman across from him, her voice filled with the kind of disgust usually reserved for people who cheated at charity auctions. "Amanda, why didn't you tell us any of this?" asked another guest, holding up a receipt for the kitchen renovation that clearly showed my credit card number and signature. Amanda's carefully constructed composure was cracking like ice in spring. "It's more complicated than it looks," she said, her voice getting higher and more defensive. "Robert volunteered to help us. We never asked him to do any of this." "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out copies of the newspaper article, "let's talk about what you did ask for and what you told the media about me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as I placed the articles on the table, watching the dinner guests recognize my photograph from the story that had run 3 days earlier. "Now," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the absolute silence, "let's discuss the real manipulators in this family." 3 months later, I received the foreclosure notice I'd been expecting, delivered by certified mail on a Tuesday morning when spring was finally starting to show itself in Spokane. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, weighted with the consequences of choices made and bridges burned. "Notice of default," the header read in bold letters that seemed to echo in my quiet kitchen. "Final demand for payment." Inside, 3 months of missed mortgage payments had caught up with David and Amanda like a tsunami of financial reality. $9,600 in arrears, 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure proceedings on the house I had helped them buy. I set the letter aside and returned to my coffee, reading it with the detached interest of someone watching weather reports for a distant city. Interesting information, but not my problem anymore. My phone had been ringing for weeks, with increasingly desperate calls. Amanda's number blocked after the first hysterical voicemail. William and Margaret's attempts to reach me from Boston. Even David's calls, which I had been ignoring out of curiosity about how long it would take my son to swallow his pride. The answer apparently was 97 days. David knocked on my door that Thursday evening. No longer the confident man who'd excluded his father from Christmas dinner, but someone who looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 months. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and the smell of desperation clung to him like cheap cologne. "Dad," he said when I opened the door, "we need to talk." I stepped aside to let him in, noting how David looked around the house like he was seeing it for the first time. The new furniture I had bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck, the fresh paint on walls that hadn't been updated in 8 years because every spare dollar had vanished into David's lifestyle. The repairs I had finally been able to afford now that I wasn't subsidizing someone else's American dream. "Nice place," David said quietly, his voice carrying undertones of regret and recognition. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling into my new recliner. "Coffee?" David shook his head, perching on the edge of the couch like he was afraid to get comfortable. "Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am about everything. Christmas dinner, the newspaper article, the way Amanda treated you, the way we all treated you." "Go on," I said, my voice neutral as Switzerland. "I didn't know about William planting that story. I swear I didn't. When I found out..." David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when David was trying to explain broken windows or missing homework. "Jesus, Dad, the things they said about you behind your back, the way they talked about our family, about Mom's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of Sarah, but I kept my voice level. "And what exactly did they say about your mother?" David couldn't meet my eyes. "That she knew her place better than you knew yours. That she understood boundaries, understood when to stay quiet." The words came out like confessions at a trial. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 6 years of mistakes filling the space between us like smoke from a fire that had finally burned itself out. "The house is in foreclosure," David said finally, the words dropping into the quiet like stones into still water. "I know. We can't make the payments without..." He stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded, how it revealed the depth of their dependence on my generosity. "Without my help," I finished. "Without the money I was sending every month while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage." "I know how it looks, Dad." I leaned forward, making sure David was looking at me, making sure my words would be heard and understood. Do you really know how it looks? Because it looks like you chose them over me. It looks like you decided their approval was worth more than your father's dignity." David started to cry then, not the dramatic sobbing of a child, but the quiet, hopeless tears of a man who'd finally understood the price of his choices. "I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever." I watched my son for a long moment. This man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who'd let his wife's family convince him that his father wasn't good enough for their company. The anger was still there, would probably always be there, but it was tempered now with something that might have been pity. "David," I said finally, "you didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference." David wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, the gesture achingly familiar. "Is there any chance, any way you could forgive me?" "I forgave you months ago," I said, and meant it. "But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen, or that I'm going to resume paying for a lifestyle that came with the condition that I be grateful for scraps of your attention." Then what does it mean? I stood up and walked to my mantel, where Sarah's photo sat next to a new picture, me with my sister Rose and her family at Easter dinner, the first holiday I'd spent with people who actually wanted me there. It means that if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build it from scratch. It means showing me respect instead of demanding I earn it. It means making choices based on what's right, not what's convenient. I turned back to my son, seeing something in David's face that hadn't been there in years. Genuine remorse and maybe the beginning of wisdom. And it means that the next time someone, your wife, her parents, anyone, tries to exclude me from family gatherings, you'll remember who actually acts like family. David nodded slowly, understanding perhaps for the first time that respect wasn't something you could take for granted. That love without respect was just manipulation with better marketing. The house, he asked quietly, isn't your problem anymore. I sat back down, feeling lighter than I had in years. You're a grown man, David. Figure it out like grown men do. Get a job that pays enough to cover your bills. Sell the house and buy something you can actually afford. Stop living beyond your means and expecting other people to subsidize your choices. David stood up slowly, his shoulders straighter than they'd been when he arrived. You're right about all of it. I know, I said. David walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Dad, for what it's worth, seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas dinner, I was embarrassed and angry, but I was proud of you too. Good, I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. After David left, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come, and stepped onto my back porch. Spring was coming to Spokane, the trees beginning to bud, the air warming with promise and possibility. In 4 months, I'd be 66 years old. Sarah had been gone for 8 years, and I'd wasted 6 of those years being a doormat for people who didn't appreciate sacrifice, who saw generosity as weakness and kindness as something to be exploited. I wasn't planning to waste any more time. My phone buzzed with a text from Rose. Dinner Sunday. The kids want to show you their science projects. I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. And real family, it turned out, was something you found with people who actually wanted you there, who valued your presence more than your presence, who saw your love as a gift rather than an obligation. Everything else was just expensive theater, and I was done buying tickets to shows where I wasn't welcome on stage. The whiskey tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. I hope you enjoyed today's story here on the Grey Revenge channel. If you did, then please like, share, and tell us your own story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Help us grow as a storytelling community and be part of this with us. Can I count on you? Thank you so much.